internal investigation, executives at Facebook found that there were as many as 470 Russia-linked accounts that had bought 3,000 Facebook ads in order to have some influence over this past election. Most of these ads were pro-Trump, anti-Hillary, and now Facebook has decided to participate in investigations. They have turned over this data to Robert Mueller as he continues his investigation on Russian collusion. And it's interesting because I think that they are now participating in this investigation and cooperating with Congress with all the data that they're requesting, because Congress is now thinking about passing regulations pertaining to social media and political ads on social media. Now, keep in mind that when it comes to television, the FEC gets involved and they ensure that these political ads clearly state who the person or people behind them are. So they have to clearly state who the sponsor is for those ads. That is not true of social media and political ads on those platforms. And so now politicians are thinking, primarily Democratic politicians, are thinking about drafting legislation that would make that mandatory, among other regulations.
Well, I don't understand, Anna. I was told by some, there's no evidence that Russia meddled. There's no evidence. Well, oops, turns out there is evidence.
Yeah.
Russian meddling, I mean, it is not an issue. It is so obvious, and the hesitancy of some on the left to just fully embrace the obviousness of Russian. They do it all the time, and they were bold enough to do it.
How dare you, Ben?
Right, and so
I guess you want World War III with Russia.
Right, that's right. That's right. I war. It's just like the people who say that this is just that this is a Red Scare and it's just like the McCarthy hearings have not read 2 sentences about the McCarthy hearings. So yeah, I don't know what evidence there is that Trump knew about it or orchestrated it. I have no idea. That may never be anything. But they definitely tried to influence the election, and it would appear to succeed.
Right, and so I think people get very uncomfortable once you start talking about they succeeded. They wanted to influence the election, they succeeded, because to blame all of it on Russia, I think, just rubs people the wrong way. There were a number of factors that led to this unfortunate outcome of the election, right?
Can I just settle that for once and for all? So
believe me, it's not going to settle it for once and for all.
No, once I say it, it'll be done.
Okay.
Okay.
You're going to solve it.
I'm solving it right now. Okay, because guys, both the 2 different camps here are driving me crazy. So did Russia swing the election? Was 78,000 votes in 3 different states, 39,000 going in the opposite direction, results in a different president. So almost everything swung the election. The weather swung the election. The Russians did. Facebook did. Not putting Bernie on the ticket did. Not putting Bernie at the top of the ticket did. I mean, every single thing mattered. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean it's the only thing that mattered. Right? So both sides who are seeing in some weird black and white things, no, none of it mattered, none of it mattered. Don't be ridiculous. On the other hand, the people are like, since Russia mattered, it's the only thing that mattered. No, she also ran a terrible campaign that mattered more. But this clearly also mattered.
Sure,
right.
I will say that's unquestionably true. We've discussed that and agreed from the start on that, there's no doubt. However, one of those things is really not like the other. 2 of those things, Comey and the Russians. The other things are politics, right? I mean, it's true that she even when the things that she did well in the campaign, she didn't get credit for it because it was her, because of whatever, that's politics, right? That was picking the wrong candidate at the wrong time, I think, despite her qualifications. So Bernie, those are all, that's politics, man. The guy who ran against her, did he support her enough? I don't know, seemed to support her a lot. More of Bernie's voters voted for her than Hillary's voters voted for Obama in 08. That's an incontrovertible fact, right? So that's what happens. Sometimes the losing candidate's voters never vote for the person at the top of the ticket because they're pissed. So those things are politics. The world's other great power, putting its resources into choosing one person over another and tricking us into thinking they weren't doing it subtly, and the involvement of Comey at 10 days before the election, those were very strange, abnormal factors. So it's okay with me if we focus on those a little bit more. But that said, the notion that Those are the only things that swung the election that was determined by a swing of 39,000 votes. Undoubtedly, all those things that.
But let me just say real quick though, look, but there's going to be curveballs in an election. You need the candidate to get past those curveballs.
That's right.
I would put Comey in the curveball category. Russia's in a slightly different category because that's a different state influencing our elections. I know that we as America have done that countless times abroad as well. We shouldn't do it. Russia shouldn't do it. But since it's our country and it's our democracy that they're meddling with, there should be consequences. No, not war. Just calm down, okay? But, right? But at the same time, for our government to go, oh, you helped to swing our election by illegally spending money in our elections and clearly supporting one candidate over the other. Whatever.
I'm going to cheat.
Okay, so I just real
that's
quick,
unacceptable.
Real quick, maybe I'm the bad guy because I don't really care too much about consequences for Russia. First of all, I 100% do not want to go to war with Russia.
Nobody does. That's
no one wants to go to war with Russia. And anyone who says like, oh, they're just like fear mongering to head in that direction, you're wrong. That's not what's happening. But what I care about more than anything is what are we gonna do as a country to prevent it in the future, right?
Yes.
If we're gonna do sanctions with Russia, fine, whatever. Again, maybe I'm the bad guy, but I don't really care. I care way more about finding where our weaknesses are and preventing it from happening again in the future, right? Because social media is still relatively new and it is unregulated. And so now there's talk about regulation. And I think that, that starts entering some scary territory, but obviously something needs to be done. And I don't care if it's something that's positively impacting Democrats and negatively impacting Republicans. I still don't think it's right. You don't want a foreign country to have any influence or any say over our election or politics.
Also, it's Russia, it's Putin. It was sinister, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not like the French were like, I want this election to be the fairest one America has. How do we do that, right? It wasn't Canada being like, what can we do to help, right? How can we exert? So it was nefarious. But Anna, screw you and you're looking to the future. That's inappropriate. We want to look back. No, okay. So real quick, can I say something before? Yeah, so I agree with Anna totally. That's obviously how we should be approaching this. Sanction, I don't care, I don't know. What we do with Russia is a more consequential question for later. It's not war and it's not messing with their election, right?
Right.
But to your Comey was a curveball. It's more than a curveball. It's like they threw a fastball and they threw it from 40 feet. Like it was that kind of thing never happens that close, right? It just doesn't. Yes, it was technically because he was part of the government and there was an investigation. You could make an argument that it was a curveball, but it really wasn't a curveball. The Russians the umpires were robots, and they were like, no matter what the pitch was, it was a strike. It was in the dirt, right?
Yeah, so, and that's much worse. So okay, so last thing on this is to just further support what Anna's saying. Look, some regulations around the internet, government meddling, and by the way, big time supported by TV who hates the internet and views it as competition. They're ecstatic about the story. They're like, yes, regulate Facebook and the others. I'm a little worried about that. Could you do some stuff around the edges? Like Facebook has hired 250 people to track this. That's good. They've kicked out the 470 fake Russian accounts. That's good. By the way, they were almost all, from what we can see in the press so far, pro-Trump. So if you followed being patriotic, secured borders, or all these other things, and you thought you were being patriotic, you were actually getting used as a tool of our enemies. So nice job, right-wingers. You are as stupid as you look. Okay, and now, so some regulations around the edges, okay, that's fine. But the main thing that our government has to do is to make sure they cannot hack the vote. Because they did try. In this election, that's a way bigger story. They tried to infiltrate voter databases, and they did. They didn't hack the vote as far as we know, but they infiltrated the voter databases in several states.
I think in the 30s, right?
Yeah, and if they're close to doing that last time around, they're gonna only get better next time around. Right. And for Trump administration, who claims that they care about voter fraud, but then is doing nothing about Russia possibly hacking into our voter files and doing mass voter fraud to steal elections, that is unconscionable.
God, we're done.
I know, but why would he, Cenk? Think about it. Why would he? He's already this insecure little guy. Like, that's the way I see him. He's incredibly insecure, which is why he's constantly talking about crowd sizes. He's constantly talking about how popular he is and how much everyone loves him. He's insecure. So in his eyes, acknowledging Russian involvement delegitimizes this past election. And he's so insecure about that, he's not gonna do anything about Russia.
No, I know, but so, and by the way, since they're supporting him, he thinks, well, maybe they'll help steal the next election for me. So this guy is not on our side. And so two things that are absolutely clear from that. When Donald Trump talks about voter fraud, he is a total fraud, complete liar. All it is to make sure people who are more likely to be Democratic, like African-American voters, students, etc., cannot vote. They don't care about voter fraud at all. If they did, they'd be going ballistic to make sure the Russians are not hacking our elections. And then finally, Trump tweeted, "The Russia hoax continues. Now it's on Facebook. What about the totally biased and dishonest media coverage in favor of crooked Hillary?" In other words, the guy who attacks everyone, bullies everyone, Democrats, Republicans, the media, the one guy he won't touch is Vladimir Putin. You think that's a coincidence? And when there is evidence that the Russians did meddle in our elections, he's like, it's a hoax, whatever you do, don't say anything about Putin, don't say anything about, you think he's not involved? Look, we need a smoking gun, I hope Mueller finds it, but this guy thinks the Russians did it and can't wait to cover it up. The only people who can't see that are the ones that are just absolutely blinded by partisanship. Support independent media, come join us at the Young Turks, tytnetwork.com/join.